Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name's Aina and I'm an oncology pharmacist. I've watched NileRed make prescription drugs out of the weirdest materials, like batteries or urine. And then today I found out he's also done the opposite, extracting really weird materials from drugs, like making metals from Pepto-Bismol. So I'm going to watch them and share my reaction with you guys.
When a lot of people get indigestion or heartburn, they turn to an antacid to help alleviate the symptoms. These antacids all contain some sort of base, like baking soda, aluminum or magnesium hydroxide, or calcium carbonate. The exact details of how each of them work is slightly different, but in general, their overall mechanism is the same. When they enter the stomach, they immediately start reacting with the acid and they neutralize some of it. And in many cases, this can very quickly get rid of mild stomach upset or heartburn.
Ooh, okay. This is like a walk down the stomach aisle in a pharmacy. So let's see what he's got here. Okay, I see Tums, and it has calcium carbonate, which is alkaline, so it neutralizes the stomach acid. Fun fact, a lot of elderly patients who have persistent heartburn or stomach issues, we would recommend Tums over other antacids because it both works to treat the stomach upset and it's a calcium supplement, which most people will need when they reach a certain age. And pharmacists usually love treating two conditions with one drug, so that means the patient has to take one less medication. White bottle with the red cap here is called Alma Gel. This one has aluminum hydroxide and magnesium hydroxide, and again, both of them neutralize stomach acid. Okay, the one in the box there is called Alka-Seltzer. This one we actually don't really recommend for two reasons. Because it actually has aspirin in it, and a lot of people didn't know that. Aspirin can be hard on the stomach itself, so if you're already having stomach issues, we don't really recommend you take aspirin, and a lot of elderly people are already on the baby aspirin dose for protecting their heart, so taking extra aspirin really isn't that recommended. The second reason, the base in it is sodium bicarbonate, which can give people too much sodium and cause people to retain too much water. So I personally think there are better options out there. And the one furthest to the right is called Gaviscon. I really like this one because not only does this one have magnesium carbonate, which can neutralize the stomach acid, it also has something called alginic acid. It actually comes from seaweed, and it creates this like physical barrier on the lining of your stomach to protect the acid from burning it. So it might work a bit better than the single agent products. And then this last bottle looks like it says Antacid, but I really can't tell which brand this is. If anyone knows, please let me know in the comments. NileRed definitely did his research because the pharmacology here is pretty accurate, and I love how he did a demonstration of a Tums pill dropped into hydrochloric acid because that's the exact same component as stomach acid. So this is basically mimicking what it's like to have the pill enter your stomach.
Most of the common antacid products are relatively simple and only include a base. Some other ones though, like Alka-Seltzer, can also contain a pain reliever like aspirin. But out of all of them, I think Pepto-Bismol is the most unique. Just like Alka-Seltzer, it's a mixture of a pain reliever and a base, but it doesn't just use run-of-the-mill aspirin. Instead, it uses something called bismuth subsalicylate. It's chemically similar to aspirin, and in the body, they're both broken down to salicylic acid, which is the active pain reliever and anti-inflammatory. However, on top of this, it also has some of its own unique effects. The exact way that it works apparently still isn't clear, but it seems to also act on the gastrointestinal tract, and because of this, it can help treat diarrhea.
Yeah, so the bismuth part actually has some antibacterial properties, so it can actually prevent bacteria from growing in the stomach. It can also help the body reabsorb more water back, and apparently it can decrease intestinal secretions, meaning you're producing less things into the intestine. So that's how the diarrhea treatment works. And then the salicylic acid part, like what Nigel said, has some anti-inflammatory effects. So overall, Pepto-Bismol has 3 medically approved uses: diarrhea, dyspepsia, which is just a term that we use to lump together all the stomach upset, heartburn symptoms. And the third one is it can be used together with 3 other drugs to kill an infection called H. pylori, which is what causes a lot of stomach ulcer. And I think they did a pretty good job naming this drug. Pepto, which refers to peptic, it's a word that's related to stomach or digestion. There's also an enzyme in the stomach called pepsin. And then Bismol, we obviously know now that it's related to bismuth. And I remember this really obnoxious commercial playing on TV when I was young.
Nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea. Yay, Pepto-Bismol!
Has anyone else seen this and have the Pepto-Bismol song based basically burned into your core memory.
However, Pepto-Bismol is again unique, and it contains a relatively high concentration of it. It also isn't mixed with too much other junk, which makes it possible to separate. Then once it's separated, it can be converted back to its metallic form. And if enough is recovered, it should be possible to use it to grow metal bismuth crystals.
That's so
However,
pretty.
I've always really liked the idea of growing metal crystals from Pepto-Bismol, so I've decided to revisit the project.
As pharmacists, I would say we probably have to look up the properties of Pepto-Bismol, make a recommendation on it, or sell it at least twice a week. And I think this is the first time I've heard anyone say they're curious about growing metal out of it.
Pepto-Bismol is most commonly found as a pink liquid, but this isn't the best form to extract from. This is mostly because the concentration of bismuth in it is low compared to its cost. However, there are also some practical reasons that make extracting from the liquid a lot slower and potentially more difficult.
Just looking at this makes me a bit nauseous.
A much better option is to just go with one of the off-brand tablet forms. In my other video, I did it with pills, but when I went to my local pharmacy this time, I noticed that the chewables were a lot cheaper. They both contained the same amount of bismuth, but I was able to get twice the amount of chewables for only 50% more. I then quickly looked at the ingredients, and they didn't seem to contain anything that could cause too much of an issue, so I picked up 10 boxes.
Alright, time for a personal story. I've unfortunately had to take a 14-day course of drugs containing Pepto-Bismol, and I had to take that 4 times a day. That's because I had H. pylori many years ago. It was before I became a pharmacist. And when I was buying the drugs from the pharmacy, I ran into the same issue that Nigel did. It wasn't that the chewables were cheaper at the time. The store just didn't have enough of the regular tablets, so the pharmacist sold me the chewable version. And let me tell you, it's probably one of the most nauseating medications I've had to take in my life. The moment you chew it in your mouth, it becomes a very chalky texture, very dry and crumbly, and it has a slight minty flavor, which may be a plus for some people, but I hate mint flavor things. What's even worse though is that this medication can give you black tongue or black stool, so it definitely was not a pleasant experience. So nowadays, if I have to make recommendation for H. pylori therapy, I will tell patients to try to find the tablet form instead of the chewables. Ooh, it looks like the chewable tablets have calcium carbonate in them as well. That's the same ingredients as Tums. I guess that will help it to have the added effect of neutralizing the stomach acid.
Now, the first thing that I had to do was combine together all these tablets, but unfortunately, this brand Life chose to make things difficult. For some reason, every single one of them was individually packaged, and I had to manually break them all out. It took about 30 minutes to do this, and when I was done, I was left with a pile of 480 pills.
I wonder if they still use the same formulation to make these chewable tablets. I mean, this video is from 5 years ago, so things could have changed, but I hate Pepto-Bismol, and there's just no way I would. Alright, fine, I bought a box. And I picked the exact same brand that NileRed used in his video. Life brand! We've got the active ingredient, bismuth subsalicylate, 262 milligrams, and calcium carbonate, 350 milligrams. Let's see if the packaging has changed. Oh, guess what? It's no longer in blisters. It's just a little bottle. Oh, and there we go. That's what the pills look like. I'm not going to. And for some reason, I came across these ASMR videos of drug blister removal machines they have in China, and it does look kind of therapeutic. Maybe he can consider investing in one of these machines if he ever has to work with medications in the future.
These were then all picked up and put into a beaker, and I temporarily placed them on the side. The next step was to make a dilute solution of hydrochloric acid, and to do this, I added 3 liters of water to a large container, followed by a liter of the concentrated acid. I did this slowly and as carefully as possible to minimize splashing, but of course, some still did happen. This is why when working with acids, it's really important to wear proper safety gear, especially things like goggles. But anyway, after it was added, I stirred it around until it looked like it was all mixed together evenly. Then into this, I dumped in some of the tablets, and immediately, both the calcium carbonate and the bismuth subsalicylate started reacting with the acid. For the calcium carbonate, it's an acid-base reaction, and it's neutralizing some of the hydrochloric acid. And in doing so, it's generating calcium chloride as well as carbon dioxide gas, which is coming off as all these bubbles. Now, on the other hand, the bismuth subsalicylate is getting hydrolyzed to form bismuth chloride and salicylic acid. The bismuth chloride was soluble in water, so it just dissolved, but the salicylic acid wasn't, and it separated out as this white solid and floated to the top.
So again, this looks like an imitation of what's happening in the stomach when we take the pills. When these pills enter our stomach, bismuth subsalicylate hydrolyzes into bismuth chloride and salicylic acid, which I guess is this top foamy layer here. But then the salicylic acid is quickly absorbed into the body, but the bismuth, only less than 1% can be absorbed into our body.
I started adding it to my vacuum filter, but unfortunately, it didn't work as well as I had hoped. Some of the filler was unfortunately still able to make it through. When this happens, you can normally just wait for the filtrate to clear up and then add everything back into the filter and pull it through again. So I tried that, and initially, it did seem to be working okay. However, as time went on, things kept getting slower and slower. Even though most of the filler had sank to the bottom, there was still apparently enough floating around to block the filter. I was initially kind of confused by this because I did look at the label and I didn't notice anything that could cause this problem. But just to be sure, I decided to take another look, and well, I did miss something. I honestly have no idea how I didn't see it, because I mean, it's blatantly just there, but one of the ingredients is pre-gelatinized starch. This is possibly one of the most annoying pill additives to try to filter off, and if I'd seen that it was there, I never would have tried this. With the pills that I did in the last video, it was super easy to filter, so all the money that I saved by doing this, I'm just paying back with time.
So pre-gelatinized starch is basically cooked and dried starch. It's a pretty common filler used in pharmaceuticals for filler and binding of the tablets. And it's also completely water soluble, which is great for making chewable tablets because you want the pills to start disintegrating as soon as you chew through it.
But anyway, at this point, I was kind of just stuck with my mistake, and I had to come up with a solution. I did some quick testing, and I found that basic gravity filtration using coffee filters and a strainer was still slow, but it didn't seem to jam like the vacuum filter. This was all the salicylic acid and filler that was separated out, and it kind of looked like yogurt or icing. From this mixture, it is possible to separate the salicylic acid, and I was tempted to do it.
Okay.
However, while I was still deciding, I accidentally knocked the dish on the floor and shattered it, so I ended up just throwing it all out.
That does look kind of delicious if you imagine it's yogurt.
But anyway, moving on, the next step was to separate out the bismuth and convert it back to its metallic form.
Okay.
And thankfully, this was really easy to do. In just one step, all I had to do was add aluminum foil. The moment it was added, it started reacting with the bismuth ions and reducing them back to the bismuth metal. The bismuth formed on the surface of the foil, but it wasn't shiny like you might expect, and instead, it was completely black. And the reason for this was that the bismuth was forming as clusters of very small particles. When light hits a particle, it gets scattered in all different directions, but then it very quickly hits another particle and gets scattered again.
That's so cool.
Most of the light ends up just getting trapped bouncing around like this, but with every reflection, some of its energy is absorbed. And because of this, very little gets reflected back, and it appears black. This meant that I still had to add more aluminum foil, and I just dumped a bunch in. Like all the other times, this just slowly fizzled away, and eventually, I was again left with a black mixture. I went ahead and tested it like before, and this time, there was way less bismuth. So I transferred all of the bismuth to a beaker, and I added some more water. I stirred it around to really watch the bismuth, and then I added it to my vacuum filter. When I turned on my pump, pretty much all of the water was very quickly pulled through. This meant that in the end, my bismuth would not only be drier, but my washing steps would also be more effective.
So looking at this black gooey paste of metal, how is this not harmful for the body? And where does the bismuth go after entering the body? So we talked about how bismuth is not absorbed at all, but it can quickly combine with other compounds to make salts in our body, like bismuth oxychloride. And then eventually, these get excreted either in the urine, which means you pee it out, or excreted through the biliary system, which means you poop it out. But it does take our body quite a long time to get rid of bismuth. The half-life of it is 21 to 72 days, which means after 72 days, there's still 50% of the bismuth left in your body.
This was what I found in my last video, and it was a method that I used to melt down the bismuth, but it's not exactly the best process. Not only did I find that it wasn't that efficient, it also required heating things well above the melting point of bismuth. I'm pretty sure that it gets well over 1000 C.
1000 C?
Which can cause a lot of the bismuth to start vaporizing, which is both dangerous and bad for the yield.
Well, according to this toxicology information, if bismuth dust was inhaled, it can cause mental changes, blood changes, bone marrow depression, which means there's no production of blood cells. So I would assume that inhaling bismuth vapor is probably just as bad or even worse.
There were actually some crystals that had formed, and I was really happy with this, but honestly, also really surprised that it worked. To get it out, I just carefully knocked the spoon against the table. From the bottom, I saw these nice blue crystals, but when I flipped it over, it looked like it was blocked by this middle piece. So to try to get a better view of things, I used my pliers and I pulled it out. This thankfully didn't destroy it, and it made it much easier to see the nice stepwise pattern that's pretty typical of bismuth crystals.
That is so pretty. Doesn't that look something futuristic, like it came out of the Cyberpunk 2077 game?
I ended up thinking that it might be interesting to try to mold it and to remake a Pepto tablet entirely out of bismuth.
Just when I thought the video was about to be over, he says that he wants to make the bismuth back into a tablet.
The no-name ones that I used were just plain and flat, which wasn't very interesting, but the brand name one actually had some texture. It also had Pepto-Bismol written on it, which would have been amazing to get onto the bismuth, but I didn't really think that would work well. But anyway, to make the mold, I just used some quick-drying plaster that I had laying around. All I had to do was mix it with water, stuff it into a measuring cup, and then squish in one of the tablets. About an hour later, it was quite hard, and to get the pill out, I just scraped at it and ran it under water. Because I'll be pouring hot metal into it though, it can't really be wet, so I put it in an oven for about an hour. Then, when at least the surface seemed dry, I took it out. Now to mold it, I just melted the rest of the bismuth in a spoon, and I poured it in. Unfortunately though, there was clearly still some water left, and it caused some bubbling and splashing.
Shoot.
And because of this, it ended up solidifying with a very uneven surface, but this was pretty easy to just fix with the torch. When it had cooled, I knocked out the piece, and it was genuinely terrible. This was all because of the water though, and I figured that now most of it should be gone, and it was probably worth trying again.
Okay, second try.
So I went ahead and melted it, and I poured it back in, and this time, there wasn't any bubbling. The result now was still far from perfect, but it was definitely way better than before. As I expected, it wasn't able to get the Pepto-Bismol writing, but the general shape was actually pretty good.
That's pretty nice, I gotta say. Yeah, but don't take this chunk and think it's a pill by accident. It is a heavy metal, so if you consume too much of it, your body ends up not being able to get rid of it, so it will cause similar toxic effects as lead poisoning or arsenic poisoning. So while I was at the store, I saw another product that triggered my memory. Where have I seen this product before? And then I remembered it's because I saw this in a really old NileRed video titled How to Extract Chemicals from Over-the-Counter Products. So let's stick to today's theme of extracting weird things from drugs and react to this video as well. Love the enthusiasm. Yes, so if I ever wanted to extract things from over-the-counter products, I'll be referring back to this video.
The first thing to do is to look on the back and try to get a list of all of the ingredients that are in it.
Alright, and we have here the Wake Up Caffeine pills that NileRed used in his video. The packaging looks slightly different, but both of them do say it's 100 milligrams of caffeine, so maybe it's just the new packaging. Just by looking at this, the bottle also says take 1 or 2 tablets every 4 hours as required, not to exceed 10 tablets in 24 hours. Okay, this seems a bit excessive because 10 tablets would mean 1,000 milligrams of caffeine in a day. That's way more than the recommended maximum of 400 milligrams of caffeine in adults per day. I personally would be very careful in recommending caffeine pills for my patients for a few reasons. So a lot of people who are habitual coffee drinkers rely on not just the caffeine portion of coffee. It's everything else that drinking coffee provides. The aroma, the taste, the whole ritual. It's kind of like when we help patients to quit smoking and we just straight up give them a nicotine patch and we take away their cigarette smoke. A lot of the times patients come back and complain that they feel like something is missing from their hands. That's why we now have nicotine smokeless inhalers now, and a lot of patients prefer those much better because it feels like they're still smoking a cigarette. And the other reason is that there are just so many caffeine containing products now. So unless you're someone who's really good at label reading, I'm always worried that people are inadvertently consuming more caffeine than they think they are. So if we add the caffeine pills to them, they might exceed their maximum. I'm actually planning to make a video in the new year about how I quit caffeine for 1 whole year and how it has changed my life. If it's also one of the New Year's resolution you're planning on making, make sure you subscribe and watch out for that video. That's really impressive. That's a much better yield compared to the Pepto-Bismol. Could he be talking about that bottle of anal lube containing lidocaine that I also watched and reacted on? So if you haven't seen that, I'll leave that link down below. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did. And please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more contents like this. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!